Here from the Air Force. If I might just speak to a little bit how MIDA functions. And this is going to be incredibly complex. I will try and simplify it as best I can. But there's a lot of misconceptions out there of what MIDA is. MIDA is a state agency that's been assigned to work with military people to enhance installations and promote military property use, and also enhance installations for military personnel use. In this case, the Air Force used to have a piece of property up, or the use of the property up in Snow Basin. And when the Olympics came through federal legislation, that property was used for the Olympics, and they lost their little dorm thing they had up there, which wasn't much, but it was something that they were able to use. And the whole idea was that another piece of property would replace that, and the opportunity to ski would replace that. And they acquired a parcel of property over in the Park City area called Red Maple. You may have heard of it. But when you drive into Park City from the Heber side, when you get off on Highway 40 at the exit to drive in, it's that mountain that's on the north side. It's very steep right there. There's a little area that the road goes between. It's kind of narrow. That mountain on that north side is Red Maple. And Park City was not excited to have that property developed. It would be a difficult parcel property to develop, and it's really not by the ski resorts. So for several years there's been a lot of back and forth, and as long ago as probably 2004 or 5, we were approached about the possibility of, Tom, you came to us at one time, it was quite a long time ago, about building a hotel for the purpose of military people, the Air Force in particular, in Wasatch County. And you know, it was, yeah, sure, but nothing really happened. Well, with the involvement of MIDA, it's opened all kinds of new opportunities to promote this type of a development. How it works is the military entity, in this case the Air Force, has a contract with a contractor to secure a parcel of property and get it developed with the hotel. That current contract is with DDRM. The county has nothing to do with that. We weren't involved in the process. We had nothing. They're the contractor. Nothing to do with it. The Air Force and DDRM at this point are working together to secure that parcel of ground, and with the ultimate goal of having a hotel that will provide rooms where military people can come stay. It will be a hotel that will look like any other hotel. The rooms will be subsidized for the military personnel based upon rank, and they'll come visit. Let's say it's a Hilton. It'll look like a Hilton. And you'll come, and they will have blocks of rooms that are for them to utilize, and we're okay with that as a county. I think that's a great idea. Well, on the MIDA side, now to make this work, there has to be some financial incentives and ways to make this function, because if you're going to subsidize room rates, you've got to have some sort of an income stream that can hold that together, and also provide opportunity to develop the recreational opportunity that will be necessary. To build a hotel is complex. It is not financially feasible most of the time to build them. They don't pencil out well, particularly when the properties are expensive like they are in the Jordanelle. And so to have this type of a mechanism has opened a door for us for this opportunity. What MIDA does is it allows it to operate as somewhat, I see it somewhat like a municipality, like a little city, because they have control and authority over taxation and other things that you wouldn't have as a city or anything else. It's not really a city. It's an entity that controls an area. The county had to agree to a proposed area. That proposed area in the Jordanelle is 2,200 acres. It is essentially the area around the Mayflower exit on both the east and west side of the highway. It does go north and south. Do you have that boundary by chance? outlined in yellow is the proposed boundary. Now within that boundary, there is a MIDA control area, which is the Blue Ledge property, which is kind of between Deer Crest and the interchange. And then the Red Maple property was included, even though it's not contiguous to this. The Red Maple property was included, and that was done through legislation with the state to allow that to happen. Because in order to form this area, there has to be a parcel of property that's owned by the military, or else it can't happen. So now those are the properties involved, and in that yellow area, people or property owners that are within that area, or what's described, that may not be quite accurate, so the actual boundary is described in our formation documents. But they have the opportunity, if the county invites them, to join into this area. So, but if they don't join into the area, we still have the JBOZ, and we still have the R-spot. We're not cutting that off, we're not excluding those people, but that opportunity of participating in MIDA only comes by participating with the county in a different way. And we'll describe that in just a minute. So MIDA, what this allows us to do is to take what's called the tax increment. And what the tax increment is you look at the property, I describe it as sheep grazing ground. Okay, it's up there, it's not, nothing's built on it. Sheep have traditionally grazed that ground, and there's a value associated with that. Okay? Now when this ground's developed, a hotel or whatever, you will obviously see a value change from this base value to what it becomes. And that's the increment. Okay? That's the increment. So when we're talking about increment, it will be the change in value. Legally, it happens at building permit time. So when whatever entity is building something, when they come to get a building permit, the value of that will be assessed at that point, and then from there until whatever's built is built, that will be the increment value. Tell me if I'm ever wrong, David, or Stan, or I think I'm on so far. So with that increment, in Wasatch County, we tax at approximately 1% of value, okay? So that will, I'm going to talk in tens and hundreds and millions and billions in round numbers. So they're not going to be exact, but they'll be about that. So out of this increment, 25% of that increment will go to MIDA and back to contributors to the, or normal recipients of the taxes, except for Wasatch County. So we don't worry about this 25%. We're not going to talk about that. The 75%, actually there may be a little bit added to that because there's a sales tax component and another tax that may come into that, but we're not going to talk about that because the significance of that is fairly small. Out of this also can potentially come assistance for subsidizing the rooms for the military. We don't know where that would be or how much that would be or if it would be needed, because that may depend on what they actually bill in the increment that they receive. So there's some unknown in that, so we're not going to talk about that either. But out of that 75%, that's then further divided down. And this is by agreement between the county and MIDA. Okay, we've essentially agreed, and this essentially follows, we already have a development agreement in place that Blue Ledge and MIDA have done, and this follows pretty close to what they've already done. This 30% of the 75%, if you're following me, is a developer incentive. Which, what this means is the developer will build something, it will have a value, and there will be an associated tax increment. And the county is saying, we'll allow that to be rebated back to you over a 25-year period as an incentive for you to build. It's a big incentive. And I'll show you some numbers in just a minute that will show you how big that is. The 70% goes into basically a county development scenario. The county is going to come up with, and I came over here and I divided this a little bit more. I don't know if all 70% exactly how that will fall out yet. I know on the development agreement that was done with MIDA, this varied a little bit. But I won't get off of that too much. But let's say 90% of this. So we've got 70% of the 75%, then 90% of the 70%. Told you it's complex, but there is a flow to it. This will go to county prioritized ski. You know what? Gotta put my glasses on, I'm sorry. My age is catching on me. Ski, public parking, public access, these are things the county deems are most important to the benefit of the county as a whole and to promote economic development. And we're prioritizing the only things that we've come up with a few things, and I'll show those in a second, but at the top of the list would be the Deer Valley ski enhancements. And through this study, they've gone through and defined these new lifts that need to be put in, and have given to us a priority of where they think which should be built first, okay? Along with that, which they haven't done, but we've kind of looked at, we realize we're going to need parking for the public too, because this is going to be an ingress place for Deer Valley for day skiing. So, estimating 750 parking spaces or thereabouts. It may be more, it may be less, it depends on what else develops up there, but we're going to go through that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through a little exercise that's going to show us the magnitude of the money involved here and why we are concerned to make sure this works the way it needs to work. I'll just write here, public skiing. The reason I put public skiing down is because within some of the development of what's proposed, there will be some private ski runs. We're not dealing with that. Okay, that's the developers will deal with that. Ski in, ski out of homes and some things like that. Those will be private. Deer Valley doesn't deal with them. They will connect up to public runs and so forth. We're not going to deal with them. The developer's going to deal with them. So I'm not talking about those. And the one thing, Bob, on what we did receive from you, it did include all of the Blue Ledge lists, and the current development agreement that they have with MIDA covers a chunk of those, so I kind of broke those out because they're covering those on that side. But not taking that into consideration, 36 million. Then in parking, and we're looking at covered parking is what we're estimating. We don't know that it probably won't be all covered parking, but it may have to be a lot covered parking because the value of the land may precipitate that it is. And because parking is a relatively poor use of land. 15 million. The portal that's been proposed to go under Highway 40 is 16 million. And the Jordan Boulevard, I'm sorry, what? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million, and that's a pretty wild guess because we don't really know if it's going to, where it's going to, alignment's going to exactly go. These were a few of the priorities that were listed and some of the big ones. There will be other things. There's other public amenities that will be associated with this we haven't identified, but this will work for the exercise I want to do today. That gives us a 77 million.
Hey, Mike, does this come from the 90% or from the 30% from the developer?
I'm not there yet.
So-
This is just the cost of
The money being spent.
ski runs, parking, portal, road. I'm going to get to that part in just
Okay.
1 second. So now you've got a $77 million potential. The thing that needs to be understood is all of these things, all these ski runs, all these parking lots, the portal, the road, everything has to be built by the developer. There is no pot of money that because they're a landowner or a developer, they can say, well, I need 20 million for a ski run. That developer has to build it. The potential is the county's going to allow a rebate of the taxes back to them in amounts that would help them. So looking at that 77 million, let's go backwards now. That's what I just asked about. So if we take the 77 million and back calculate how much construction, how much value do we need to generate $77 million? $16.3 billion of vertical. Now to put that in perspective, Wasatch County right now, total value of assessed value of Wasatch County is around $3 billion. Everything in Wasatch County. That's Deer Crest, that's the St. Regis, that is every parcel of ground and every vertical building that we value for taxation purposes, about $3 billion. And we're saying if we're going to generate increment to cover this type of infrastructure, all those people in Jordanelle have to build $16.3 billion of vertical. And this is after you put stuff in the ground, because that doesn't count. You'll have to put all that in before you ever get a building permit, which could be a significant cost of development. This will just be vertical in essence. Although the value of that does come into play later to generate the increment, but the increment is set at building permit time. This is where our concern is. In order for this to happen, it's obvious that several things have to happen. One, we need everybody to kind of participate and join in, because if people don't join in, it takes away from the potential of the increment. The biggest problem we have is one landowner is about 70% of the potential of this. One landowner. There is the concern the county has, and in the last few months has been the concern why the county's been encouraging Mayflower properties to participate. And there's been a lot said and a lot done to say the county's trying to keep development from happening. That is not the case at all. It's the other way around. We're trying to make sure Mayflower participates, because if Mayflower doesn't participate, this probably won't happen. It can't happen, because there's not enough property to generate $16.3 billion vertical. Can't be done. So this is where the numbers come into play and where we're concerned at. We really hope that everybody will want to, but if a developer comes in, and we don't want to stop anybody from developing, but if a developer comes in right now and says, I want to get a plat, I want to start developing, they're out of the loop. They don't get to participate in MIDA. The county is not going to start instigating MIDA until the Air Force has a parcel of ground in that yellow area. So we're waiting. It's a hard process for military, for the federal government to acquire property. Environmental assessments, all these things have to happen for the federal government to buy a piece of property. It takes a long time. That means it may be keeping you from developing if you're a landowner and want to develop.